the further I go into this, the more I feel it's just the foundational thing. And where people tend to misunderstand meditation is treating it like some sort of mental spa. Like, I don't think any of us do this, but in society it's more like, oh, you meditate to like get peaceful. And there was this one day in Hawaii, I walk into class with Bruce, and he's sitting beside this really sweet old woman. She must have been in her 80s at the time. She was learning from him for many years. And Bruce had just got back from India, and she's asking him about his trip, and she says, you know, he was working with actually a teacher of his in India. And so she's like, yeah, I just noticed this sort of like peace and calm in you that I didn't notice before. Maybe she was just being sweet or like making conversation. And Bruce, in his way, is just like, it's not about being peaceful. And that really kind of, it was this memory that I've never forgotten, because the further I go, the more I realize it's not about being peaceful. It's about transformation. It's about transforming the way that you see reality. And in transforming the way you see reality, you transform every action that you take in the world. And there was, when I first started meditation, I didn't know what I was doing, like pretty much everybody that starts. And I was sort of caught up in this loop of like, I need to learn exactly how to meditate. And I was procrastinating on it, just getting started. And so eventually I was like, fuck it. I had a spare bedroom in my house, cleared everything out, so there's nothing in the bedroom, and I put a chair in the middle of it. And that was my meditation room. There's nothing else in the room. And every day for 20 minutes, I would go and sit in the chair. And that was my whole practice. I still didn't know what I was doing. Maybe I kind of focused on my breath here and there, kind of like try to be present, whatever. But I just made sure I did it no matter what. There was one night friends were over and it was like 1 a.m. and I realized like I hadn't gotten a chance to meditate. So I just went up, you know, mid-party, 20 minutes, came back down, kept on partying. I was like, I am going to do this no matter what. And a girlfriend of mine was living at the house at the time in that summer. And we were sort of at the tail end of the relationship. It was breaking apart. She was going away at the end of the summer. And she'd been living there for a few months. And we were just like bickering back and forth. You could tell it was just in the process of ending. And I start this meditation practice in like maybe July. And by the end of August, I started to notice this really weird thing that hadn't been there before. Like we would still get in these sort of fights, but there was no real reaction. I was just like, oh, she said this. And then there's this sort of gap between her saying it and my response to it. And so I could just change the way that I responded to her. There was this space in between the stimulus and the response suddenly that hadn't been there before. And it gave me all this room to then change the way that I interacted with her. And, you know, the relationship still ended, but it totally transformed the like final days of that relationship and made it so much smoother. And that was without even knowing what I was doing in meditation. I was like, if I had actually understood, it could have, you know, been significantly greater. But just like sitting down in the room for 20 minutes, you know, it made a profound shift for me. And now it's, how many years later at this point, like at least 10, 11 years. And it just continues to become more profound. So I think we'll share, has anybody seen the Ken Wilber brainwave video? So if you want to see like firsthand the potential of meditation, has everybody seen this photo before? So this is a Vietnamese monk who's protesting and went to the middle of this busy intersection in Vietnam, covered himself in gasoline and lit himself on fire and stayed. I mean, the human body doesn't like die as soon as it's in flames. It takes some time, right? It's conducting the flames. He sat in like meditation lotus posture in the middle of this intersection, completely still, until his body just toppled over and he passed. And he did this as a protest. That's kind of the power of meditation that I'm ultimately pointing at. I'm like, that's control of your internal world at a level. I had a friend who said every time he second guessed the like potential of this path, he just look at that photo and it's like, oh, right, this is real. So a more tangible example is Ken Wilber. This is a bit long, so we won't, and it's quite an old video.
Hello, everybody. This is a small portable EEG electroencephalograph. What it shows is brainwave activity, basically. It's a very simple but fairly accurate machine. It's an early mind mirror machine. The panel itself is divided into a left and right-hand panel. The left-hand panel basically measures electrical activity in the left hemisphere of the brain, and the right-hand panel measures electrical activity in the right hemisphere. What you're seeing from the top to the bottom is beta activity, then alpha activity, then theta activity, and the bottom two bars represent delta activity. So what this is showing is activity in the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere through a whole range of beta to alpha to theta to delta waves.
So you guys get that? His brain's active, and it's, yeah, his brain's connected to it. And so he's just describing the experiment that they're running, and then he lays down and he starts controlling his brain waves.
Pause it here for a moment. So what we see here is obviously no activity in the left or right hemisphere. Beta, alpha, theta states are all zero. You can see that the delta states, however, there's still a great deal of activity, maximum activity actually, in the two lower bars representing delta. Again, you normally see delta only in deep, dreamless sleep, which the traditions maintain is a state of pure witnessing. There's a state of constant witnessing that does accompany this. We don't necessarily see, because we're at an early stage of research in these areas, it's not necessarily the case, I don't believe, that all states of witnessing are accompanied by delta. As a matter of fact, in a lot of meditation research, certain types of witnessing states have theta activity with alpha activity. That's also very common with other types of deep meditative states. We see theta.
So he goes on to demonstrate, like, essentially control over his brain waves, as you can see.
Witnessing is going to disappear. That's what I'm trying to do subjectively.
That should be pretty clear what we're getting at here. As Bruce said, it's not about being peaceful. It's about gaining control over your internal landscape, over your inner world, and in turn transforming the way that you see reality. And there's a very specific, systematic series of steps to developing these skills. This pushes into like yellow turquoise area at the higher levels. This is kind of what turquoise looks like. And so I'm sharing this now just to open everybody up to the possibility here, because it's a long process. Meditation is one of those things that, you know, you could be doing it for years. I think it was 20 years of practice that Ken Wilber went through to get there. But 20 years will pass and you'll either get there or not, you know? And meditation is one of those fundamental things. We were practicing with Bruce in Maui one day, and he made this comment right before we started. He said, put aside the thoughts and the ideas and the tasks of the day, all the stuff that you think is important for the day, and it's ruminating in your mind. You think you have to figure it out right now. Just put it aside, just for now, and spend the next 20 minutes dedicated to the one thing that's going to help you execute on every single one of those tasks. And that's what meditation does. It essentially is like the tide that rises all the ships. It develops this skill for dealing with anything that life throws at you. So, yeah, Shinzen Young had another analogy or way of putting this, just to like tie this together. I think Signs of Enlightenment, most people have gone through that in audio or book form, most of us. He makes reference to this analogy of a woodcutter that doesn't spend any time sharpening his axe, and he is hacking away at trees day after day after day for years, wondering why he's not falling as many trees as he could, and yet he doesn't sharpen his axe. Meditation is the axe sharpening. It's the like sharp blade of the mind, keeping it sharp and sharpening it, and so that it can cut through problems and cut through situations and see clearly exactly what's happening. And so really, I'll say that the benefits of meditation, there's really three that you want to be aware of. The first one is skill development. So it's the skill of actually holding your mind in one place and of seeing clearly without being thrown off by judgments and stories. It's control of the mind. That's the first one. The second one that kind of arises out of that is real, genuine internal transformation. This is when we get into things like dissolving and purifying. The nervous system and our body and internal world holds all of these incomplete experiences and old emotions and traumas and sets of beliefs and all of these holding patterns and blockages that keep us from expanding into, we use that analogy of the seed as an embryo of potential that keeps us from expanding into that full potential. So first it's skill development, second is transformation, and what arises out of the transformation and purification is direct insight. And I mean insight in the sense not only of problems and situations that you're working with in your life, because it can certainly clear those things up. There are many days where I'm struggling with a work problem and I'll go and practice for an hour and I'll come back, and sometime throughout the practice, maybe 30, 40 minutes in or whatever, the answer has just come to me naturally. It didn't come from me trying to figure it out. It came from me settling my internal system and removing what was obstructing the answer. So direct insight can come in that way. And the higher level of direct insight is direct insight into the nature of reality. That's really the highest promise of meditation, is that it can give you access to seeing directly and clearly who and what and where and why you are. So if that's what you're into, and not everybody is, but if that's your thing, then meditation is like for millennia been the path to getting there. You have a question?
For number one, you said skill development. You mean through meditation, your ability to develop skills enhances?
So cognitive skills, like mental skills.
Yeah.
You saw like Ken Wilber controlling his brainwave state. That's not a skill necessarily that we're like developing. It can be a skill that happens, but skill could be something as simple as just the ability to focus your mind in an unbroken stream on one thing. That's a basic skill. And it's like, how useful is that? It's amazing. And if you don't have that skill, how difficult is it to like do anything? So that's what I mean by that. And I think I said to Mason originally. This came to mind on like one of our calls, where it's sort of like most of us have been walking around with one of those old janky flip phone cameras, like looking at reality through a flip phone camera, and it's kind of pixelated, it's unclear, it's shaky, it can't zoom out or zoom in. We're just like moving it around, looking at the world through this very limited lens. But if that's the only type of camera you'd ever had, that's all you would know. You wouldn't realize like, no, there's actually these like brilliant 8K cinema cameras that can zoom in with perfect clarity and zoom all the way out and see this whole landscape, and again, hold perfect clarity. And you can even like filter the lenses so you can see it through different ways, and multi-angle cameras. And it's like, the mind is just capable of so much more than we realize. And it's a hard sell sometimes, because not that I'm even selling anybody here, we already practice a lot, but it's a hard sell to I think the general public, because if you just haven't experienced it yet, it's like, well, what am I doing this for? I feel kind of calm after 20 minutes. That's cool. Maybe I'll do it a few times a week, but you're not going to get it that way. You're not going to get it a few times a week. You're not going to get it through the Calm app, or, listening to Headspace as you fall asleep. That's just not going to do it. Heavy duty meditation is, in my opinion, the foundational practice for the internal path.